How do you teach people how to get over their stressful thoughts and return to love?
You see, that is the whole spectrum on the Sattva yoga teachings, So you have practices, specific techniques for meditation techniques. Of course, there is a foundational practice of where you're working with the mind, how to take your attention beyond the scattered thought, start to really go into a stable mind. Then you're really working with energy to really begin to master your energy, because emotion is, and every emotion has a particular energetic movement in your physiology. So you have specific kriyas to really start to move energy in a specific manner, and then where you draw your attention and to channel the energy as per your desire with your attention, so the energy is not scattered. And so there are specific techniques which you learn. That's the whole Sattva yoga practice. It's a full spectrum practice. We take the 5 body levels. So this is the body level.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of Deliberate Creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain, awakening consciousness and doing all that delicious stuff. I have another exciting guest to introduce you to. He's all the way over there in Rishikesh, India. Well, if you're watching this in India, it's not far from you, but it's far from me. And he's coming out to Australia very soon, so we thought we'd have a chat with him on ATP. His name is Anand Mehrotra. I'm probably getting that wrong. And he's a visionary master teacher and the founder of Sattva Yoga. Welcome to the show, Anand. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for having me with you.
It's wonderful that you're coming out to Australia. You said that you've been to New Zealand before, but you haven't been to the big land down under. So this will be your first trip out here. And your teachings have grown exponentially in the past few years. How long ago did you start the Sattva Yoga?
Yeah, I started teaching in the West when I was 20 to 22. So it's been 12 years, in the West, I've been traveling. Before that, I was just teaching in India and Rishikesh mostly, it's been 12 years. 12 years, quite a journey.
I want to talk about, bringing the Indian traditions to the West, but I want to actually just explore your journey a little bit and see how it all started for you. How did the spiritual teaching start for you? What was the beginning of your journey?
Yeah, for me, it was, I was intelligent. I call it the intelligent birth. I was blessed to be born here in Rishikesh. And for me, the spiritual teachings never stopped. So it was just a natural progression. My guru was there when I was born. So I grew up in his lap, growing here by the banks of the Ganga at that time, That was the pastime as a kid. You met different yogis and masters, rishis, coming. This was the gathering place of it was kind of a big lab of consciousness. So that was my natural exposure. I was introduced to that and I was breathing it, and it was my play field. So, it was a natural path. It was
So who is you said you're born in the lap of your guru. Who is your guru?
Yeah, his name was Anand Swarup, Brahmachari Anand Swarup. He was a rebel master, I call him, because he was very traditional in the sense, but at the same time non-traditional. He was very unique in his way, and so he didn't have an ashram or he was on his own, and so it matched. He matched my sensibility because I have that similar sensibility. So it was perfect match.
So did he recognize you when you were a child as having stayed connected to your spiritual consciousness, to your expanded consciousness? Did he recognize that in you?
Yeah, I think definitely. It's his name was Anand Swarup, and he named me Anand. So he was the one who gave me my name when I was born. My parents didn't name me, so there was a natural recognition. And most of my learning in the beginning was more like a natural transmission. It wasn't even like I was realizing, right? So it was, because when you're a child, you really don't have that much self-awareness. I was asking questions, but there was not a comparative knowledge. Okay, I know this. There was just, natural absorption that was going on. And it was after I turned 16 when I really started to have a exploration in a much more profound way. Before that, it was more just absorbing. And then I began to realize how much blessings I had already received,
And it says here that at 22, you had a Samadhi experience. And that's when you said you went to the West. What is a Samadhi experience for those people who don't know what that is?
I would say the total unity. It's the experience of total unity when everything just stops, and I was at that time living as a monk in an ashram and studying, and most of the time was spent in meditating hours, and it was at 4 a.m, and I speak of it, and it's still, I'm here, and that experience is here, and it's difficult when the more intimately you get with this experience, the harder you find words to explain it, sometimes. And was it at 4 a.m, it was just some spontaneous, I was meditating and everything just stopped, I entered that kind of like a vortex. I had not experienced something so profound till then. And it lasted for more than a week. I was just in that kind of this zone where I couldn't speak. I didn't speak spontaneous. There was no decision was there. There was no decision. There was no decision maker. There was just this flow. And there was just this incredible grace, just tears flowing. And whatever I looked at looked just so beautiful. If I looked at a person, I found that how beautiful that person was. So I looked at a rock or a tree. So I was just walking around, just tears rolling, and everything was just had this inexplicable glow. Everything was glowing from inside out. And that marked, profound shift. Before that, I was teaching every now and then, but I was doing a lot of other stuff. And then after that, I naturally went to a cave, and I stayed there for a while. And when I came out, I just kept teaching after that. So it marked a profound shift in my journey as a young man.
Well, when you describe it, it sounds a lot like what people go through when they have, some people go through when they have a near-death experience, or even when they come back after a near-death experience, they're still in this state of grace, and they feel one person I had on the show, Penny, said that she could feel the trees loving her and the rocks talking to her, and everything was beautiful. It's like being on drugs. It's like everything is beautiful. Why do you think more of us don't have these Samadhi experiences?
I think it's they are available. It's available, and that's why I started to teach. That because I realized I had that experience. It wasn't just an accident. It was, of course, it had an element of grace, a spontaneity to it, but there was energy backing it. It's like a sap when you put a seed in the ground and you water it, and all the environment is correct, and then it just breaks through one day. And that is the moment of this active energy. But there is intelligence backing it. There's a lot of work going on. And so that's why the Vedic yogic teachings are there. So to help us create this environment where this experience can be more available to us, because on theoretical level, it is available to each and every one of us. Why it doesn't happen is because our mind-body apparatus is not refined to tap into it. And that's why the teachings are there for us to refine our apparatus, refine our mind value, refine our breath, our mind, to even accept it. Because a lot of time we will just fight it. The ego is so strong, it will deny it because it is so deeply anchored in unworthiness, this sense of unworthiness that it can't happen to me, There's something fighting in us, So that's why the teachings are there. I think if we really apply them in a deep manner, it's something which is nearest to us. I mean, we are nearest to ourselves. We don't have to go somewhere else. We don't need a visa, to have this experience. There is no immigration line or any of that.
So you're not selling Samadhi visas then, Anand. With join Sattva Yoga and we give you a Samadhi visa. Or maybe, I don't know, who knows? Who knows, maybe that's the case. And, India is sort of marinating in traditional Indian spiritual experiences. Everyone goes to India to find themselves. And over the last, I suppose, 100 years, the Indian traditions have really come to the West. We've got a yoga studio on every corner in Sydney. everyone wears their yoga pants. But I think it's kind of different what you're talking about, your yoga tradition. It's more about looking within than exercising the body. Is that right? Or you do both, or how does it work?
You see, as I said, there is ultimately, when you really go within, you realize there is no within and no without. These are only distinctions are only there from point of view of the mind. The senses, when the senses look out, they look without, and when the senses are closed, we feel within. But when you really go within, in your consciousness, you realize within and without, there is no distinction. It's just an expression of one indivisible whole. And it includes the body. There is nothing which is not included in yoga. I mean, yoga...
You froze for a minute. Yeah. There's nothing indistinguishable in yoga. I mean, yoga is what you said, the last thing you said?
Yes, the yoga is unity. So we're living a unified life, an integrated approach to living. Instead of an isolated existence, it's a holistic, expansive living. So in the yogic teachings, yes, all value of life is addressed. And that includes the body, it includes our mind, it includes our relationship, it includes our work. It's every aspect of life is included in the yogic teachings. Of course, some people can take just one isolate, because the human mind, when it is conditioned by industrialized education, it becomes very reductionist in its approach. That whenever it approaches any field of education or knowledge, it ends up reducing it to make somehow it finds safety in a reduced form of knowledge. And also because then it's easier to market it, it's easier for people to grab it, but the real meaning of the yogic teaching is expansive. It is huge. So it requires a certain level of stillness in you to absorb these teachings, And it, of course, it includes asanas as well. It includes the physical aspect. There is no denying that.
Do they teach yoga in school in India, in mainstream school?
No, not in mainstream schools. In some schools, they are beginning to, and at least they are beginning to teach the breath practices and some asana in some schools. I mean, there is, I run a foundation here where we have about 350 kids studying. So they are all learning and also yoga, and they meditate every day, and, when they come before they leave.
I hang around with a lot of beautiful people who are trying to make a difference in the world, and a lot of them are trying to get this sort of mindfulness and yoga in schools, and schools are quite receptive to it these days. But I thought, coming from India, that the schools in India would be more receptive to it. It doesn't appear so.
I mean, it's evolution, as I said, it's not a cultural phenomena. It's an individualistic phenomena, and we are now in the time where globally this conversation is taking place. So now, when there was a time in India too when the economic model took over, industrialized model took over, and but now there is an awakening even in India where this conversation is becoming more mainstream. More schools are taking yoga, mindfulness practices, introducing meditation. It's also a movement gaining momentum. It's a global phenomenon right now.
It's a global phenomenon. Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. I want to ask you about what the India, brings to the West, what the East brings to the West spiritually, and what we bring to the East spiritually, what the West brings. But I also want to ask you about your spirit guides, getting back to your Samadhi experience. Samadhi. Did you meet your spirit guides? Did you meet your sort of spiritual team?
You see, I think I met my spiritual team before that, and I was I had this deep, intimate relationship with some great teachers, and my master had dropped his body. Mm-hmm. So what I realized, when the realized being drops their body, they become even more available to you, and one of my spirit guides, great love, was Anand Mehrotra, and, she was not in the body. So I've always felt a deep connection. So yes, and when you have the Satori, of course, in that unity, even if there is a thread of separation, that dissolves. I mean, it's just you experience the greatest love there is, the illusion of separation totally drops.
Well, this is true. And they don't have to be realized beings. I mean, if you're open to it, sometimes your dad that didn't speak to you when he drops his body, he can become more available to you in a much more profound way.
Yeah.
But when you're open to it.
Absolutely.
So you had the experience of knowing that you could connect to, disembodied, physical beings. When you're a child,
Yes.
like that never left you. Nobody had to teach you how to do that. You just knew that.
Yeah, it was like, it seemed something very obvious, like for me, as my greatest friends in the childhood was the nature. I would love to go and sit on the banks of the Ganga, and I would have like full on conversations. And sometimes I would go to the mountains and I would just talk to the mountains. And I thought it was very natural. And then, when you look at people and they think you're weird, so it made me question a little when you're starting to be a teenager, especially at that time. But for me, it was something which seemed very obvious, like why nothing seemed dead. Everything was full of life. Nothing seemed dead.
And with your students, are they asking you to do the same? Are they? Because I know my students are always asking me, how can I connect with my spirit guides? How can I talk to my spirit guide? How can I hear them? And it's a large question. A lot of people are asking. And I think that, like you, it's kind of really obvious. And when I teach people, I say, you've got to let go of it's out of the ordinary, because it's actually really ordinary. And I suspect you were doing it when you were young anyway. And then, as you said, maybe
Yes.
school taught you out of that connection. And it's just a remembering, not really a teaching. It's just a remembering of a conversation that's always been there.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why, as I said, the yogic teachings are really there for you to undo what has been done, because you have the natural intelligence there. You are as much nature as the mountain and the rock, as the intergalactic universe. You have the same natural intelligence. So when the Vedic yogic path, we are really going into our essential nature. We are tapping back into who we are. And the more we become ourselves, the greater these capacities, these natural siddhis, this natural intelligence opens up. This conversational, intuition gets deeply refined. You have greater access to, reasonless joy. You have greater compassion. This extrasensory perception. This naturally increases because these are natural to who we are. We just have to come more and more close to who we are, to the true self. And these qualities just naturally flower.
And what do you think the East is bringing to the West? Do you think through their spiritual tradition? I know that they've brought the tradition of yoga as it's seen as an exercise routine. What else?
I think finally we are living in a time in Dwapara Yuga where the East and West have dropped. There is no East and West anymore. There is just one whole. There may be 100 years ago there was East and West, but now the distinction between East and West is dropping.
Well, culturally we're still very different. I was in India not too long ago, and it's quite a journey going to India if you've never been to. If you've grown up in somewhere like Australia or Sydney, even Sydney's a really affluent. Seriously, Sydney's a really affluent, and even New Zealand. New Zealand and the big cities, they're very affluent, very organized cities. And you go to India, and it's chaos.
You see, there is a true distinction. There is the socio-economic, cultural distinctions in every culture. But when we speak of the Eastern spirituality, or the spirituality that grew in India, in this land, I consider it is the spiritual heritage of humanity. I don't think it belongs to any particular nationality. I don't think of this spirituality. We call it the land India now. It's a modern name. It didn't really exist in the time of the Vedas. There was no India at that time. So what we are speaking of, the spiritual tradition of this land, they belong to the humanity. And when there are, a lot of, now when I say that there is one tradition, what I speak meaning is, like sometimes you find people who are born in Sydney or in America or in Europe, they have access to a deeper aspect of this Yoga Vedantic teaching than somebody who might be born here and might be going just on the surface value, So I think there is a deep, especially in these times, this kind of a global awakening which is going on around the world. We are really reclaiming our spiritual heritage globally, and which is beyond any national identity. Somehow, by the grace of existence, mysteriously so, there was in this land, which we now call India, this geographical location, what became like a gathering place for remarkable beings at a certain linear time. And they were emanating this. But for you to really awaken your inner potential, when you really go within, your identity drops, because you cannot be an Australian anymore. You cannot be an Indian anymore, because Indian, Australian, American, these are just labels on the outside. So when you go within, you are universal. You cannot be Indian anymore. You cannot be American, because they are, if I believe myself to be an Indian and I'm really identified to that identity, there will be a point I will arrive to where this identity will be in conflict with some other identity, because it's just an identity based in thought.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. But, as I look around I've got an Italian neighbor who so identifies with everything Italian. And it's because I'm Italian. We are Italian. We eat like this. We think like this. We are Italian, and we come from a very multicultural place, Australia, where we've got this, this soup of culture that all works together quite well. And it's easier for us to drop identity, but for some, not so much. And even, there's such a rich culture in India that people are so identified with being Indian, and my ancestors and my culture and my food and and it does, it does create separation when you're talking like you're talking, in that we're not Australian and we're not Indian. We're just human beings. We're souls having human experiences.
Yes. As I said, that's the spiritual teaching. If you go into the spiritual teachings of India, they are speaking of dropping identity. So when said, when we are bringing what is the Eastern teachings, the Eastern teachings are really that going beyond any thought-based identity. Now, that does not mean we don't celebrate our uniqueness and our different tastes and flavors and different cuisines. That makes the life more interesting. It gives variety, it gives a great pleasure. But if we are really believing in those identity, then somewhere we are confused. Ultimately, we can play these roles. And that's truly the teaching also, that when you expand your consciousness, you cannot be limited by any ideology, whether it is economic identity, whether it is religious identity, whether it is national identity. None of it can hold you. You can play these roles and you can appreciate your uniqueness, your unique story, but that story cannot hold you. And that's what we are speaking when you're going from ego consciousness towards a unity consciousness. It's a natural movement. And, in yoga, when the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the first definition of yoga Patanjali gives is yoga chitta vritti nirodha. And second, then he says, I will explain. I will explain. What it means is that what is yoga is the cessation of modification of consciousness. That this sense of I, which is the original assumption, I am, my body, this I, when it ceases to be modified, it ceases to catch hold of identity based in thought, that is the beginning of yoga. And then what happens, he says, tada drashta swarupe vasthanam. Then you begin to see who you are. You simply see, as you said, that is very natural. As you begin to see who you are, and that is yoga. So in that seeing, the limitation starts to drop. You can appreciate the limitation, but you are not bound by the limitation anymore. And that is, I think, one of the most important teachings of the yogic tradition.
Lost you again. You'll come back. Come
Yes,
back, Anand. Come back. Here we go. Okay. So, that's true. Everything you say. We've had a lot of Indian teachers come to teach us in the West. Have there been any Western spiritual teachers go to India to teach? I mean, I know that you say there's no separation between East and West, but culturally, do they go over there and teach, or is it just all going one way? All the yogis are coming from India to
No. Right now, recently, there has been a big shift. There was a very good friend of mine. He was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. His name was Swami Kriyananda. He's no more in his body now. Mm-hmm. But he came from America. He developed an ashram in Delhi. he brought the Yogananda's teachings back. He had this inspiration. He had already created, most of his life he worked in America, and he has a big center in Italy, in Assisi. And then he moved to Delhi. So he spent last years of his life in Delhi and building his Yogananda's work here. And a lot of his teachers are still now teaching, Westerners teaching yogic teachings, even at my center.
They're teaching yogic teachings, but he was taught, so the wisdom came from India to the West, he was taught, and then he brought it back. But are there any people coming, not coming from the sort of traditional Indian yogic teachings and just coming from spiritual teachings out of the West and coming and teaching in, I suspect there are.
No. Maybe. No. I've just, that is what I have realized. I have realized in my journey is that when any of you meet people globally, mostly, people who are on a spiritual path, and they're really deepening themselves, somewhere we will start to find common denominators. That you'll start to have a similar vocabulary. Consciousness, in every other word, is consciousness, and it doesn't matter what word you use. Yeah. God with any other word, So I think, there is Brazilian teachers, there is a teacher, but ultimately they get touched by even he was a shaman before, and, but he's still doing his shaman work, but at the same time is influenced deeply by the Yoga Vedantic teaching. So I think it seems the Yoga Vedantic teaching somehow absorb anybody who does come to India, spiritual teachers, they somehow, because they're already in that state, they absorb these teachings, so naturally they get a little bit blended. I personally haven't met somebody who is not teaching that at all and is in India.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so I read something that they posted about what you're going to speak about in Australia, and they describe you as this, Anand. He's a rebel and his teachings are radical. That's how he breaks the limits of one's mind to access freedom, ecstasy, and bliss. How do you do that? Your teachings are radical and you're a rebel. Is this true?
Depends who's looking. I just think of myself as myself, But as I said before, I did not accept as my guru was a rebel, and from the standpoint of traditionalistic viewpoint, as I said, the religious, if you look at because in India, a lot of times this can be confused, right? The spiritual teaching and the religious identity. There is a distinction there. That's as I said, when you say religious teaching, yes, the religious teachings are different from different places, but spiritual is one unified whole, with different words, But when we spiritual beings, you can find a kindred spirit. You can find that even if you're using a different language, you start to find similar meanings. So in that way, and I started teaching very young, so I had a very different methodology. I think, I did not accept any ready-made answer. That's one of the great.
You didn't accept
the ready-made answers, the ready-made path. I was interested in exploring, and if I didn't feel a call within myself, I didn't accept it, no matter how much intellectual sense it made. So it made me quite unpopular at times. I was not very traditionalist in that sense. So yes, people started to have that. I didn't think of it as rebel. I was not rebelling against anything. I was just being myself. But I think when you really be yourself, it starts to become an act of rebellion. I think it's one of the greatest acts of rebellion is to be totally yourself.
Well, with any tradition and any cultural norms, when you start to expand outside of what is normally done, you're considered a rebel. But I think that even in spiritual tradition, we have to expand because the world is such a different place now than when it was first brought through or written down or channeled or taught. So Absolutely. Maybe you're a rebel in India, but maybe not so much in Sydney. Maybe you'll leave, Anand, more of a rebel after your Sydney trip.
Wow.
What are you hoping to share in Sydney while you're here?
Well, we'll see what spirit wants to share, as I show up.
You'll show up and they'll tell you
exactly.
Yeah,
I don't really have any plans.
Yeah.
I don't really work with them.
Yeah, I know that. That's how I work as well. I do my interviews like that too. I just show up and see what happens.
Yes.
what Spirit wants to talk about. We've got Corey and maybe Jeff are going to join us online soon, and both of them are sponsoring you here in Australia, helping you with your trip. And Corey texted me before and she wanted to talk about the Divine Mother because she sponsors a lot of people that bring through that Divine Mother energy. Do you want to speak of that?
Yeah. I mean, my relationship to existence has been through this sacred divine feminine. That's in my personal conversation, that's how I talk to existence, is as a divine mother, and for me, I think globally also right now, we are in a time where that is a important relationship for humanity to reclaim, is the sacred feminine.
And what is the sacred feminine to you? How would you?
I think it is first of all the really valuing the inner realm,
So
valuing
the inner realm being your intuition, your emotions, your feelings. Is that the inner realm?
Yes, and ultimately the truth of who you are, not just the becoming of the self, but the realization of the self. So because there is two movements to self, the being and becoming. And our cultures, we are more interested in becoming, and everybody is just always becoming, but the being is sitting unnoticed. So I think this art of moving in the direction of being and exploring being and the existential inquiry into the nature of life and self, it has a feminine quality in my experience, to it. And for me, that's divine feminine, And I have also had this, I think it was, my relationship to nature, to Ganga, and seeing the experiencing and talking to nature like that, like an intimate friend. For me, it was this response, like this warm, energy, which was always there. And I deeply am in love with that, the Divine Mother.
Tell me, have you tuned in to the part of her body that is Australia? Have you tuned in to the land?
Not yet. That's why I'm coming.
When you come here?
When I land, I'd love to do that. So when I land in any place, I like to just tune into the land. That's one of my first things I do when I get to a land, to get into the energy of the land. What is her aspect there? So I'm excited. That's one of the things I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, because, I've been sponsoring and talking to teachers coming here for 20 odd years, and I've heard many of them talk about how extraordinarily different the energy is down here than the rest of the world. And I think, there's many reasons, but we live in this huge land mass and there's such a small population. And also the custodians of the land, our traditional Indigenous people, they hold a very strong energy and spiritual connection. I think they probably might have been the first humans of this current species in the world. They say that it was in Africa, but I think that Australia was even older than Africa. And they have quite an extraordinary tradition in their spiritual teachings. And it's interesting down here. A lot of teachers say it feels quite different to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I look forward. I mean, I've heard that, what you just said from different people. So I have students who have worked with the Aboriginals in Australia, and, they have shared their teachings, and, there is something very valuable in that. That's why I'm really looking forward to connecting to that energy once there.
So how do you help people overcome their stressful thoughts, their busy mind? That seems to be the... I talk a lot about deliberate creation. I speak very much about what you speak about, but I speak about it very differently, about taking a hold of your energy flow and being deliberate in how you flow your energy, which is really how you think and feel and what you focus on and what you tune into. How do you help people? And the thing that gets in the way of all of us is our stressful thoughts when we're angry or frustrated or we're judging somebody or upset with somebody or criticizing. How do you teach people how to get over their stressful thoughts and return to love?
You see, that is the whole spectrum on the Sattva yogic teachings, So you have practices, specific techniques for meditation techniques. Of course, there is a foundational practice of where you're working with the mind, how to take your attention beyond the scattered thought, start to really go into a stable mind, then you're really working with energy to really begin to master your energy, because emotion is, and every emotion has a particular energetic movement in your physiology. So you have specific kriyas to really start to move energy in a specific manner, and then where you draw your attention and to channel the energy as per your desire with your attention, so the energy is not scattered. And so there are specific techniques which you learn. That's the whole Sattva Yoga practice. It's a full spectrum practice. We take the 5 body levels. So there is the body of food, which is your physiology. There is the body of energy, which is prana. There is the body of thought. There is the body of belief system. What are really your fundamental core beliefs and values, and who you think you are. And there is the body of bliss. So how unified are you? How much access do you have to Satchidananda, unified field of consciousness? So we address techniques. We address, of course, on the level of understanding, and then we have techniques specifically to address all 5 layers of the body, so that of being rather, so that you can have an integrated approach. So so you can actualize in a proper manner. There is an active dynamic flow, and at the same time stillness. So it's a dynamic stillness and inward and external movement both.
I like that, the body of bliss. I'm going to think about my body as a body of bliss.
Yes.
So that body, what did you call it? The body of, prana was the energy body. What was the physical and the food body called?
The Annamaya Kosha, the body of food. Annamaya Kosha, it's called.
Okay, and that's your physical body. Is that
Yes.
incorporates what you eat?
Yes, incorporates what you eat.
And does it also incorporate how you move?
Absolutely. So there is specific practices for movement, and that's where the asanas come. There are certain specific kriyas and breath practices, because also our body is a mind, right? The body is a packet of information. So when we are speaking about stress, the stress is not just in the mind. It's not as just thought. It is logging in the body, in your biomemory. You start to have this chronic information in your physiology. So there are specific asanas and sequences and practices which you also to help you release the biomemory from the body, so the body is more fluid. So there's a peace emanating in the body as well. Because even though we are not body, we are embodying ourselves. Yeah.
I want to ask you about this, because this has been something that I observe. So a lot of the Indian gurus did not do the movement thing. They would sit and really not move very much, just sort of sit. And you can see, like in the past, you can see the way their body, they sort of have a thicker torso and skinny limbs, and they really didn't do too much moving, some of the really famous. And yet I see a lot of people here that have very strict yoga practices. They're very fit, they're very dedicated, and they're very, they're battling their emotional and mental minds. So, Anand, how do we marry it all so it all flows and moves smoothly and works together and it's all balanced?
You see, it's, as I said, it's really what kind of life you're interested in. It's about value. So a lot of my guru was very active. He climbed mountains. We climbed mountains together, and he was walking, and we were swimming in the Ganga and crossing. And I still go and swim across the river whenever I get a chance. I climb mountains. I ride motorcycles, mountain bikes. I track up. So we are very physically active, and I sit also for hours for meditation. So I think that is the integrated approach is whole. But a lot of time in the West, because there is yoga has become a part of a fitness industry, so they get obsessed with again the body image. So body should be healthy, but this fitness means a very different thing in the West. A lot of time it is just really how you look, how there is a confusion there. It's really profoundly somehow based on self-hatred, and there have been some traditional gurus, who I don't know the teachers I had contact with, they all liked to be active in some way or form, because I feel it's natural for the body to move. I personally don't enjoy just sitting, so I can't say much to them, to what their experience was. My experience with my teacher was we were active, and there was a holistic, natural, you should always have because life is meant to be living. You have to live this life fully, because that's one of the purposes of life, is to live it in fullest manner as possible. So the yogic teachings are there, the way they, is to really make you more capable to live, not to run away from life, but to embrace life in its as full way as possible, without fighting life, without fighting yourself.
Okay. So if you're someone that's older and maybe you've never done a fitness practice or a yoga practice, and you start on this journey and you're introduced to the teachings, and the teaching involves yoga, and yoga is a bit like a torture session where every stretch and every pose is pain, how do how does that help your spiritual expansion when you're sort of in pain? Or do you just meditate through the pain?
You see, now there is yoga as a torture chamber is a confusion, where it is part of the fitness industry, where there is no pain, no gain motto they follow. Whether it's like you do CrossFit or you do hot yoga. So put your leg behind your head. It's really not what is essential. Yoga it's about you, where it fits you. So of course we have to always challenge the body a little bit, challenge ourselves a little bit, but it shouldn't be causing any kind of pain and all of that. That's really not serving. That self-mortification, it is of no use. So it is depending on who you are, where you are, you design the practice according to your particular nature. You respect your body, you honor your body, and you honor your energy. So you work with that. That's what really the yogic path is. It's not about fighting yourself and everybody looks the same. It's like a cookie cutter thing. It's really honoring what works for you and what is essential for your being.
So when you come out here and do your sessions, that will include physical yoga, it will include exercise, or is it just teaching?
No, you see, it will definitely not exercise, but practice, yes. When we doing mostly it will be teachings, and there will be subtle practices, not the grosser practice, because I don't need to teach that. People know that already. If they need to practice that, they can learn that. But there will be subtler practices which are more intuitive and more, working with the subtler aspects of self, not the grosser.
Okay, so Jeff has come online. Hello, Jeff.
Hi.
Are you plugged in?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
And I had a bit of a chat to Jeff. He said that, was it about 5 years ago? I first met Anand 5 years ago at a retreat in India run by another teacher. And
Tom Knowles, yeah.
Tom Knowles. Is Tom Knowles still around?
He just left this morning, actually.
He left Australia?
This morning, yeah.
Oh,
he was here for the last 3 weeks, yeah.
And do you want to, say anything about Anand or ask him a question? And Corrie might be joining us too in a minute, and she has a couple of questions for Anand.
No, I just wanted to...
Here she is.
Oh, there's Corrie.
Hello, honey, you're online, but you haven't got your ears plugged in. You haven't got your sound on.
Hi.
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Cool. So Corrie is sponsoring Anand in her beautiful place up at Whale Beach. It's absolutely gorgeous. You're going to love it. And I invited you both to come online to sort of, join the party and say hello and ask any questions. I know that Corrie had a question I was asking about the Divine Mother. Did you want to ask anything else about the Divine Mother energy, Corrie?
Yeah, I would just like to ask Anand once more how that was introduced to him, the Divine Mother. How that worked. How was that? You must have told me, but I've forgotten.
For me, my earliest memory of when I had these conversations with nature, with existence, and I used to always have this intimate relationship with the sacred, and somehow I always experienced her as Divine Mother. That was my intimate experience, and whenever I spoke to her by the sitting on the banks of the Ganga, or even when I was on the mountains, it's always this profound sense of this Divine Mother, and it's never left me. It's one of my greatest sources of power, really, is that this connection, So for me, the experience of existence has always been Divine Mother. And my Guru also, and when he spoke of, and he was also a great tantric master, and his relationship also was through sacred feminine. So I think that also influenced me. But from a very young age, for me, spontaneously, naturally, that's how I saw her. And of course, it keeps evolving as you grow in time, but it is still something so sacred and, the most intimate relation you can have, really.
Yes. And does she come forward to you in a form of like Durga or Kali or just Shakti or Mother Earth, or how would you see it?
In different times in my life, in different forms. So sometimes she comes as the Ganga, and sometimes as the Gaia, Mother Earth, and sometimes as fierce Kali. When your ego is up, and sometimes the mind is, then you have to surrender to Kali and to lay down your head.
Yeah, I understand. That's so good. Thank you. Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. Whatever you need.
And Corey, you had another question about parallel realities.
Yeah, I just was wondering if Anand if you actually believe in that, or if you have a theory about it from the Vedic perspective about parallel lives. You know how they say our essence is in this life, but also in many different dimensions. And if you are a capable soul, can you have parallel lives? How does this look? Or is this just different aspects?
Think time, first of all, time as we see it is a mental phenomena.
Yeah.
So when we are speaking of time in its reductionist fashion, it's a mental phenomena, it's a neurological phenomena. So when our consciousness starts to expand beyond mind, we naturally start to have access to multiple dimensions. Now, when we start having multiple dimensional access, for me, it's not the parallel life as we are living right now. In my personal experience and realization, it doesn't seem like it's parallel life, like we are having two separate individualistic life, because it's not something personally to me that how it comes, and doesn't even sound charming. But what starts to occur is, yes, you have a multi-dimensional access. I mean, as this dimension is there, so many other dimensions, and they're all fields of consciousness. They're all fields of consciousness. Naturally, your consciousness expands beyond the domination of the mind. You start having access to multiple dimensions. But I mean, in the yogic Vedantic tradition, they've always speak of lokas. Which now loka is, and they also call it now multi-universe theories. So lokas are multiple lokas are there. Celestial beings or devas, so you start having access to that realm, which is not somewhere else, really. It's not somewhere else. It's just different expression of here.
Yes, it's a different frequency.
Exactly.
We talk about this a lot. We were talking about you chatting to your mates who are not embodied, like your teachers and your dead friends. I call them dead friends. I like to be irreverent about death because I don't believe that it actually exists. It's and people say there's a heaven somewhere else, but it's actually here. It's just a different frequency, and when you tune into that frequency, you see it all around you. Do you do that much, Anand?
Yes.
You do? Tell us about that.
It used to get me a lot of trouble because I was being school, and for no rhyme or reason, I would just feel like smiling and laughing. And you see, these teachers, especially in school, they're a little bit threatened by spontaneous laughter of a student. So they felt, what is wrong? Why are you laughing? Do you want to tell me, Master Mehrotra, what is so funny? I said, everything. It looks so funny to me. So often I would be asked to leave the class, and then I would go out of the class, and then I would tune in, and everything would be still heavenly. So as you shift your consciousness, it is, and that's one of the things for me, which has been. I mean, we are in. That's where we are. We are in heaven. We have to stop waiting for it.
Yeah, I think the laughter sometimes is the energy of, the dimension where you're in. Like sometimes you connect with a person, you just want to laugh all the time. And it's beautiful, right? Yeah. You have that.
So Jeff, Anand has told me that he's going to be selling visas to Samadhi when he comes.
I think that's fantastic.
Oh, we probably need to do that.
With the price of the seminar, you get a visa to Samadhi.
Yeah, I think we can organise that.
That's amazing. Yes. Oh, it will be no effortless.
Yeah. And Anand's going to be busy for a few days, especially over that weekend, so hopefully he's ready for that.
Actually, I haven't touched on your Vedic astrology, because apparently you do Vedic astrology readings with people. Do you want to talk a little about that, Anand?
That was one of my, that was one of my, introductions into this Vedic knowledge was Vedic astrology. And I was very deeply moved because it's all started with my own chart. There was this master who never met me. He dropped his body when I was born in the same year. And he made a chart of me. He never saw me. He was my mother's guru. And as I grew, I read the chart. I was so surprised. How did this gentleman who never met me, how did he know so much about me? He described how I would look, my interests, and it was fascinating. So it really got me curious into that science. And, I started studying it from a very young age. And I find it very relevant because there is two expressions to self. There is the being, the timeless self, Brahmana, and there is Jiva, which is the time-bound expression of that universal self. And this time-bound self has his or her particular journey, and it is flowing and interacting with this energy in time. So it helps us. It became a great tool to help guide and understand, okay, what is the energy, because we have a very gross understanding of time and energy, very mental. So it gives us a deeper intuitive understanding of the flow of energy and how you can really utilize the energy flow in the best possible manner. So that's how I look at it. I think it gives us a greater kind of, and it's an intuitive clarity about movement of life. And Vedic astrology is a multidimensional approach. So you're not just looking at your sun sign, it's a much more deeper science, looking at the whole moon and...
Well, I think astrology is a multidimensional approach. I think Vedic astrology is just slightly different to astrology. I studied astrology years ago, but I didn't study Vedic. I think it's just different mathematics.
Different mathematics, but there are also in the Vedic astrology, there is different charts, right? There is a whole timing system, a whole dasha system, which is not there in the West. There is only the transit system. In this, there is dasha system. There is within the 12 zodiacs, there are 27 nakshatras, and within that 108. So in the West, there is only the 12. Right. So it's then quadrants they use. So this just adds another whole dimension.
So you were reading
just on the level of understanding.
You were reading about, you said your time, space part of yourself. It's like your personality or your egoic mind, as opposed to your, what did you call it? You used different words, but do you think you can transcend your chart?
Absolutely. The chart is just it's a tool to help you transcend ultimately. It's to help you transcend. That's what it is. And to have most fun doing it.
Because I know that when people have readings, and they get readings with either astrology or Vedic or any sort of reading, they have that as their map for their life, and it kind of can limit them to what else can be possible.
You see, that's with any science. All science ultimately are subjective sciences, and it depends on who's reading it, who's interpreting it. And the name for Vedic astrology in Sanskrit is called Jyotish. Jyotish means science of light. That just helps shed light so that you can see. And as you see, so it helps you see clearly. And then the very act of seeing clearly becomes a foundation for freedom. Without seeing clearly, you cannot be free. So as you see more, you are freer. That's why the Rishi, even the word Rishi is the one, in English is translated as the seer. The one who is seeing clearly. So Jyotish is just helpful tool. It's just another tool to have. It's not, there is no debate, free will versus predeterminism. Free will and predeterminism, they are coexisting together. They are expressions of one same reality. And as we expand, then we realize these are not opposites. They are complementary forces of existence, and we can use them in an optimal manner.
Wow. Beautiful. Jeff, anything to say?
Actually, I was going to ask a question about with the Devic layer in different countries, are there actually different Devas in different countries?
Good question.
I do find it's a very, that there is a dominant force you can sense in different countries, on a grosser level, on a cultural level, you can sense a dominant force, that there is a dominant force. But on a subtler level, as you go, then you find all devas everywhere, but on a cultural level, you do find that there is a dominating energy in different countries, definitely. Like in India, you find the Saturn country, is Shiva energy is dominating. But when you come to Rishikesh, there is the sacred feminine starts to Well, if you go to US, definitely there is the Mars dominating there, it's becoming, and this magic culture of everybody is busy. So it's definitely, you can see there is a obvious expression of a Devic energy in a cultural, socioeconomic environment. But when you go deeper, you start to sense, you can get a deeper experience. But then there is, as Karen was saying, there is the land energy, which is unique in every place. And that is just so marvelous. I mean, because I was just in Norway last week, in Portugal before, it's profound, the change, in Norway. It's such an amazing energy there in the land, so unique, so different. When you go just 2 hours in Lisbon and Portugal, it's very different energy. How she speaks to
soft? Is Portugal very soft or not?
Yes, absolutely. Portugal is very soft. I think it's one of the softer places I've experienced in Europe. And Norway, I mean, has a very deep silence in it. I mean, very different than, like, you go to Austrian place, the nature also has their silence. But in Norway, it's very different. The silence is much kind of more, it draws you in a meditative state.
Yeah, nice.
Recently I had a download from some Aboriginal elders that were not in their bodies. We were doing some land meditating and activating, and I don't know what we were doing. And I had always posed the question, why is Australia so barren? Because when you fly over Australia, it's so arid. It's so dead. It's just desert, red dirt. It's just such a barren land. It's such a huge landmass. Why isn't it lush like India or like the USA? Why doesn't it have beautiful rivers and mountains in the middle and water? And I had the answer in this download, and they had said that the traditional custodians of the land, the Aboriginal people, have been caretakers to it, and that they didn't want it to be lush because they didn't actually want a lot of population on this particular land in this current consciousness. And they were saving the land for when humanity rose, their consciousness. And so this would be in our future. I don't know how far in the future. I'm thinking after my lifetime here. And then the land would restore itself, and a natural lushness would come back to the land. And then the population would come back to Australia, but it would hold a different consciousness. So I asked an Aboriginal elder if that was true, and he looked at me kind of frightened. He said, yeah, but that's like one of the Aboriginal secrets. So it's kind of interesting that it's sort of being held for a humanity with a different consciousness. Because you look at us, we the whole population of Australia fits into one city in India, Yeah,
it's true. It's weird, isn't it? Weird. Yeah.
Okay, guys, I think we might wrap it up now. We've been talking for about an hour and a half. Did you have anything else that you'd like to say? Remember, you're on camera and this is going out to the world.
Well, I can highly recommend having a Jyotish reading with Anand. I've loved my time with him in Rishikesh. I just wanted to say that. But we'll look forward to seeing you, Anand, in Australia.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen.
Yes, I'm looking forward to you coming out as well. We're going to have a fun adventure.
Yes, I look forward to being there. Thank you, Karen, for having me here. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for being on Accentuate the Positive Media with us and sharing your story. It's been really beautiful.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff and Corey. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks again for joining me on Accentuate the Positive. I look forward to catching you next time. And remember, if you want to join our Inner Sanctum, go to the KarenSwain.com/Inner Sanctum and join our little tribe. See you later. Bye for now.
Thanks so much for joining us for another enlightened conversation on Accentuate the Positive. If you would like spiritual guidance from my guides, Blissful Beings, go to KarenSwain.com for a reading, or to listen to more enlightened thought leaders share their wisdom. Go to the listen page on KarenSwain.com and choose who you want to listen to. All the podcasts are also available on iTunes. Remember to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, you name it, we're there. Until next time, bye for now.
If you feel like that's what you want to